Hey guys, it's Matt here from Sweat Elite, and welcome back to the Sweat Elite podcast. Another episode of In My Opinion, number 21, and recording a day earlier than normal. It's Tuesday, the 14th of January. Normally record on Thursdays or sometimes Wednesdays. We're heading to Houston tomorrow morning, and we'll be out and about most of tomorrow and the next day. Going to visit Luke, my podcast host over on the Training Talk podcast series. He lives in Houston. Those that listen to that podcast series would probably know that, those that follow him on Strava. And yeah, just going to hang out with him for a few days before running the Houston Marathon this weekend. I'll talk all about the goals and the plan and the fueling and all that. Joe Skipper gave me some good advice on how to carry carbs because I am not in the elite field, but I'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about Shelby Houlihan. She's returning to running as of yesterday, so we'll talk a bit about that. Those that don't know who that is, I'll explain who she is as well. Workouts of the week as usual. Got some good questions on carbohydrate cycling, an extension to the whole races selling out fast topic that seems to be of strong interest to people, which it should be, because there's sort of a little bit of a conundrum at the moment whereby it's just really difficult to get into some of the big marathons, and even some of the races that aren't majors, they're really difficult to get into. So yeah, some interesting emails sent in about that. When to incorporate long runs, brands behaving poorly. I've spoken a bit about some issues I've had with some brands, and someone asked about basically what's the worst situation I've ever had with a brand, I believe. I skim over most of the emails and don't really think about answering them until I really get to them. But I believe the question was sort of focused on that. And someone also asked a question that I hadn't thought about for a while, what times they think that I could run over all distances between 100 meters and even past the marathon, so ultra, even though I don't know if times matter too much past the marathon, just because the courses are so different. But they also asked about Ironman, so I'll talk about that. So yeah, plenty of things to talk about today. Thanks for joining me once again. Before I go into all of those things, including the workouts of the week, I want to say that many of you expressed interest in the Globe Runners Boulder running experience, which is going to be the second running experience held by Globe Runners this year, or in general, because we just launched this year. So Arizona is happening at the end of this month. That's sold out pretty quickly. Boulder is now open as of about 24 hours ago, 24 hours before recording this, in my opinion, video. So if you are interested in joining us from the 4th till the 7th of April in Boulder, it's going to be a awesome weekend full of training, education, meeting some professional athletes, good food, good times, adventure through the Rocky Mountains, through parts of Boulder, a little bit of Denver as well. It'll be awesome. So yeah, 4 days, 3 nights. It's a Friday through Monday. If you're wondering if you can come and work remotely, so you don't have to take any time off work, you could. Obviously, it's Friday sort of midday till Monday midday, so it's only really 2 half days of work, being Friday afternoon and Monday morning, and then Saturday, Sunday. But if you have a job where you can sort of manage your own time and you can work remotely and you don't have a lot of things set in stone that you just need to sort of get through, that's the majority of my job. Most of my, probably 70% of my working life right now is coaching, and I can kind of do that almost any time, or it's rare that I'll have to, really set time aside to do it, say between 3 and 4. It's normally just a case of just doing it between Friday and Sunday. You can definitely join us by working remotely for sure. And on the Portugal trip earlier in 2024, we had 21 people attend. I think 5 or 6 of them were working remotely while they were there. That was a 2-week experience. Europeans can get a lot more time off work, and they tend to not really be too fixated on their, well, I shouldn't say they're not fixated on their careers. Of course they are. And I can't speak generally for several hundred million people, but in general, they seem to be a bit more relaxed about the work-life balance. No offense, Americans. Australians are just as bad, to be fair, as Americans. In general, that is. Definitely speaking very generally at the moment. But Europeans can get more time off work. So we had a 2-week trip. That was when it was under the Sweat Elite name. And the point to bring that up was that many of the people on that trip were working remotely. I think it was 5 or 6. It might have even been 7. And so they were sort of missing runs here and there, and then joining, for everything that they could. So you're welcome to do that. And the other cool thing about this experience in Boulder is there's an extension offer for another 7 days. So you can make it a 10-day trip. And so there's 4 days, 3 nights, 4th to the 7th, where there'll be, there's a full timeline on the website. You can head to thegloberunners.com down in the description of this video. This is also on video today, by the way. I forgot to mention last week that we're back on the video. This is all on YouTube as well. If you want to type in IMO number 21 or Matt Fox, you'll find it as well. So it's in the description of this video and also on the podcast players. And it shows the full itinerary of the trip. So there's education seminars, like I said. There's training sessions that I guide. And after the 7th, when everyone leaves it staying just for the weekend, I will continue to take sessions through the whole week, every single day, whether they're runs or workouts or hill sprints. And so you can extend the stay for, I think it's $230 a night. Reem set the exact rates here, and that would include the accommodation, not full board after that. The full board and all the meals is just from the 4th to the 7th, but that would include full basically training and coaching support for the next week. So plenty of options there. Do go and check it out. Super excited to host that experience because Boulder is right up there with the best places in the world to train, in my opinion. There's just so many awesome trails. There's so many tracks. You can go to the Rocky Mountains. It's pretty difficult to run up there, but we will go up there, and you'll discover it if you do join us. So yeah, plenty of exciting things going on that weekend from the 4th to the 7th, and we're already working on one in May, and it's probably going to be in Europe, in the south of Europe, and not fixed yet. It depends on a few things, but it'll probably be in Portugal, probably towards the first half of May. So keep your eyes and ears open for that if you are from Europe, because I don't know, I feel like when I have Kenya camps, it's mostly Europeans coming, even though I haven't really hosted an American camp, but I know for sure that, at least based on the previous experiences that we put out there under Sweat Elite, a lot of the Americans just found it too hard to get to because of the travel time, and they just didn't have enough time of work. And so almost everyone, I believe, coming on this next camp is from the US or Canada. And yeah, so if you're European, stay tuned for the one in May. And we're working on some more in June, July, August, etc., but they'll be announced later. Extension to the Ballarat Marathon incentives thrown out to the Inside Running podcast, guys. I haven't heard from them yet about that, even though I think they probably published last night or this morning, but I haven't listened to that episode and no one's told me about it, so I don't know if they've accepted that deal or not. But Ballarat Marathon have reached out and said, even though they actually reached out before that when they heard me speak on another podcast, that I might do it. And they've kindly offered me some travel funds to get there, which is awesome. And they've also mentioned that there's 5 people entered now under 2:19:30 if I was to enter. So there's 4 without me. So that's pretty good. I feel like that's stronger than I thought it'd be. And I know Dean, probably shouldn't say, well, I think he's made public now anyway. Dean Menzies, I think, is also thinking about running, 2:17:50 guy. And I've also heard Reese Edwards might, not sure. And I think Thomas DeCanto possibly as well, who's a 2:12 guy, I think, or maybe 2:11. So if these 2 guys confirm, then that's a pretty good deal. And I do have to go home at some point very soon anyway to have, to do 2 things. One, update my passport because it's almost expired, although I can do that in the US, but it's just much more difficult. And a fair few of my friends couldn't come to my wedding. About 3 or 4 specifically, quite close friends, just simply couldn't make it in Chicago because all of them have had at least one kid in the last couple of years, and it was just really expensive to travel to the US at that time. So I have to go home and sort of have a little secondary dinner celebration for the wedding. So I'm leaning towards Ballarat at the moment, but not locked in. I'll definitely have to lock it in sometime soon. I think I said last week that I have to lock it in this week, but yes, we'll see. A few were sort of curious about the Coros thing that I mentioned. Yeah, Coros did reach out. I'm actually going to try they've recommended that I try the Pace 3 or the Pro 3. Excited to connect. Thank you for getting back to me. Definitely, I would love to send you the watch, you to test and try. I'm confident that you will love the product. For a marathoner, I highly recommend the Pace 3 or the Pro 3. The Pace 3 is our newest release with a bigger, bright AMOLED screen. Pace 3 is a classic, and we received a lot of good feedback, and it has been well received by the market. If any of you, Coros seems to be, I don't currently have a sponsorship deal with Garmin. I have had a couple of little 6-month stints where we've done things together, but I've never been an ongoing sponsored athlete, nor do I really want to be an ongoing sponsored athlete with almost any brands. With any brands in period. And even Saw have not ever sponsored me personally. They've only sponsored specific types of content, like YouTube videos. But if someone could let me know if they're a big watch person, what is going to be the benefit, if anything at all, to wearing a Pace 3 or a Pro 3 over a Garmin 965, I think I've got 965, I think I have on YouTube. I can show you here. I think it's the 945. But what do you think I'm going to gain? It's a 965. But what do you think there is to gain from a new watch? As in, and I'm not super interested in measuring anything further. I believe one thing is probably going to be the track accuracy, because I've heard good things about Coros and their accuracy around a track, and maybe even the indoor running accuracy of the paces and so forth, because my Garmin on treadmill is not great. it's sort of like 50% of the time it's pretty good on the treadmill. It's quite close to what the treadmill is saying, but sometimes it's just way slower. My watch is way slower than the treadmill. So I have the treadmill on 7-minute mile pace, which is 4:21 per K, and my watch will be saying like 8:20, which is like 5:08 per K. And yeah, today I ran 15K just before recording here and did some strides, and I set the treadmill at 6:50 per mile, and so I think that's, what is that? 4 minutes, I think, and I think my watch said 4:11, so that's pretty close. But anyway, besides the point, if anyone has experience, so I think I asked for the Pace Pro. I asked for the newest release. So if anyone has the Pace Pro and thinks that I could learn anything, of course I could do this myself, but I'm just always keen to learn things from others if they've experienced anything, because oftentimes I find that the marketing on the products from brands, they don't often highlight like the best thing about it, because the people working there are often not great. They're not really into running themselves that much. They're more into developing stuff. So if you know anything about the Pace Pro from Coros, which I'll try probably from next week, I would love to hear it. So Shelby Houlihan is back running. So many people listening to this may not know who that is, because the thing that went down with her was 4 years ago. And I think a lot of people listening to this, I'm going to guess maybe 30 or 40%, maybe not quite that much, probably weren't even running then, because I know a lot of people started towards the back end of COVID, like 2021. So Shelby Houlihan she's still alive, is a professional runner that was banned from running in 2020. She tested positive for a substance called nandrolone, which is it a steroid? Not sure, but it's banned. Basically aids recovery and muscle growth, from what I understand. Could be wrong with that. I'm not an expert in that field, but it's definitely something to do with that realm of recovery. And she screamed innocence and basically said that it was a burrito that she ate that had tainted meat, very high in nandrolone, and that was why she tested positive. Now, I looked into this quite a bit when it all happened. It was a while ago now, obviously. It was about 3.5 years ago that sort of the hearing all went down and all that. And I don't remember all details, but I do remember thinking to myself, after I listened to a few other podcasts from people that really understood nandrolone and how they understood, how much she had and how much beef she would have had to have needed to eat to reach that sort of level of nandrolone in her system. Some people that were familiar with the matter were saying like 25 to 30 burritos she would have had to have eaten, realistically, even though I think she had 1 or 2. And I think at first the consensus amongst people was that there's no doubt she's guilty. I think that team, Bowerman, sort of had a few shady instances, and there were some rumors that some other athletes had tests that were really close to the limit of nandrolone. I won't say those names, but I am familiar with them, and they're still racing. They've never been banned. And by the way, those people have never had any real, positive tests, and they're still, from what I understand, those rumors could be completely false. Rumors in anywhere, or running especially, but I feel like even if you really stuck your head in any space, there's going to be rumors that aren't true everywhere. And so some of those athletes that I heard rumors about, I still assume that they're not guilty until you see otherwise. But Shelby, she had so much in her system, and her excuses just didn't quite add up. And I think the receipts of what she bought were not really adding up with exactly what she did claim to eat and all these sorts of things. But there was one thing that happened during that whole process that made me wonder, man, maybe she actually is innocent. And I don't know if she is. I have no idea. My gut feeling says that she is not, so that she is guilty. If I had to place a bet, if I was just roulette table, had to place a bet, one way or the other, no big risk either way, my gut feeling is that she did cheat. But I'm not sure about that. And there was one thing that happened that made me not sure. She was given the option to admit guilt and get 3 years, which would mean she could have qualified for the Paris Olympic Games, or continue to fight, say she's innocent, and miss the Paris Olympics, keeping in mind that at the time of the Paris Olympics in 2024, she was 30. Now, anyone that knows middle distance running well knows that not many 1500 meter runners and 800 meter runners, she's specifically focused more on 15 and 5K, not many 800, 1500 runners continue improving past 30. It happens sometimes. Nick Willis was a rare example of someone that kept running really well into his mid-30s. But most people tend to go downhill around 28. Most. Maybe even 26. In the 800, it's more like 26. In the 1500, it's more like 28 to 30. At least I've noticed. Very few people run their personal bests or really achieve much more than what they already had past 28. It's very rare, although it does happen sometimes. And in the 800, it happens almost never. And so I thought to myself, she literally must have been thinking to herself, I'm going to be 30 at the Paris Olympics. I can put all this to bed because the public think I'm guilty anyway. At least, she probably should have known that. So it doesn't really matter if I say yes or no and I say I'm guilty or I'm not. Everyone thinks I'm guilty. So she could have had the option to have actually made the trial, unless I'm missing something in this story. Please email me if I've got this wrong in any way, shape, or form. But I remember hearing about this and I remember thinking it was a literal break in my thinking. I was like, that's so strange that she would not take that offer to have that sentence reduced to three years and be able to make the Paris Olympics, or at least make the trials for the Paris Olympics. Nope, she said, I'm not guilty. I will continue fighting. And she missed it. Now, that really made me wonder. But like I said, I still think that she's guilty. Just because of everything that I heard and read about the amount of... The reasons why I think she's guilty is, and I don't remember the specifics because it was 3.5 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, but I remember hearing about the amount of nandrolone in her system was just... It could not have possibly been meat in one burrito. I remember specialists were basically just saying, and they had no skin in the game, these guys. They were just people observing it. And so, yeah, that made me wonder. But it was interesting this morning to see that I think it was yesterday, because basically the reason why this is news now is because her ban was over as of yesterday, the 13th of January. So she's now able to compete. And I saw FloTrack were highlighting a documentary coming out about her. Now, there was a lot of mixed reactions to this. FloTrack are making a documentary all about Shelby Houlihan's return. Stephen Scullion has been very vocal on Instagram stories about FloTrack should not do this. They are supporting her, blah, blah, blah. When I first saw FloTrack post this promo video of her potential, her coming back and she's going to do a documentary series, my gut feeling was, I actually think this is going to be interesting to watch. Scullion made me think, oh yeah, because I really respect his opinion. I think he's deep down a very smart guy. He's been very vocal about his challenges, but I think Scullion's idea of FloTrack supporting her, I'm not super sure. I mean, maybe, highlighting her is another thing. That's true. But now we're just using words and it's just, what word are you using? Supporting, highlighting, showcasing, whatever. I personally think this is going to be interesting to watch. Do I think anyone should give her money and support it? No, of course I don't. But I want to watch this. Do you? I think most people will be curious to watch this. Scullion was saying, cancel FloTrack. I strongly recommend you cancel FloTrack. I think that's a bit... I see his opinion. I really do. I do see that. I think it's not a bad idea, but I think that... and my standpoint doesn't come from anywhere of forgiveness. Yeah, okay, I'll take that back. 1% maybe. And the reason why I think 1% of that my feelings here come from forgiveness is there was, some cases you look at and you just like, I'm 100% convinced of this. And this is the case of murder trials and all sorts of stuff. This case, it was almost like not quite 100. It was like 95. I'm like, yeah, I'm 95% sure she's cheated, but I'm not 100. And so in that case, I don't know. I think let the series fly. Let the FloTrack series go. I'm going to watch it. I don't even have a subscription, but I'll probably subscribe for a month and watch it because I'm just genuinely curious to see what she says, what she's got to say, and how the last few... Because I think, love her or hate her, I don't even really know anything about her. I've never done video, I've never done an interview, nothing. I've never spoken to her, have absolutely no... not even have friends of friends with her, so I've got no real, skin in the game here, lacking of a better word. But at the same time... you have to commend in a way her commitment to continue to train through that whole 4 years. I read online on an article the other day, apparently she's done a few time trials, 4:02 for the 1500, I think 1:59 or 2 flat for the 800. And I think it was a pretty quick 5K in there as well last year. So she's trained for 4 years, knowing that when she comes back, everyone's going to hate her at the start line and probably people are even going to boo her in races. Like, man, wow. Yeah, I mean, you got to give her some credit for just not caring, not giving a shit at all, and just I'm gonna do this no matter what anyone thinks. A large part of me is sitting here going, what are you doing? Just don't bother. Just go do something else. I'm reading that she's got no sponsors. She's trying to get shoe sponsors, but who's ever going to sponsor her now? 31 years old, drug ban, oh man, it's all very strange. But because it's so strange and because it's not adding up to me, and there's something just so weird about this whole thing, I want to watch it. And so I'm looking forward to FloTrack's video about Shelby. Do I support her? No. Do I think anyone should support her? No. But I do want to watch this because I'm curious to see what she has to say and where she goes from here. Yeah, I just thought I'd talk a little bit about that because quite a lot of my friends on Instagram are sharing different opinions about that. And Peter Bromka has, I think Peter Bromka comes from it from sort of the same standpoint as me. He's sort of a little bit like, yeah, we're not super ever sure what really happened there, but let's hear what she has to say. So yeah. All right, Houston, heading there tomorrow. I'll be there tomorrow around this time. Luke and I are going to record the Training Talk. In fact, I think the Training Talk podcast is going to come out before this one. So you can go backwards and see the podcast that we recorded because this is going to be published on Thursday. Training Talk is going to be published on Wednesday. So we're going to record as soon as I land, a day late, but publish it Wednesday night. And we'll talk all about my last taper week leading into the Houston Marathon, where I hope to run my 4th marathon in 4 months and hope to run another personal best. I've managed 2 personal bests in those 4 months in Chicago and at Indy, October and November. CIM, I didn't manage the 3-peat, but I feel pretty confident about another one in Houston. And I'm really excited about the forecast because it's going to be pretty close to, at least it feels like temp, pretty close to 0 degrees Celsius or 30 degrees, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like perfect for me. Looks like it's going to be a little breezy, about 10, 12 miles an hour, but I don't really get affected that much by the wind. Doesn't really bother me that much until it's like really extreme. And maybe that's potentially because I'm just heavier and sort of come from a more power, background, sprinting, middle distance. I'm not sure, but wind doesn't seem to bother me too much. But I do know that much lighter folk have a harder time. Like Reem has a hard time in the wind, and so does Luke. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm going to shoot for 2:16 and see what happens. So yeah, Joe Skipper reached out to me after last week's. So Joe Skipper is, many of you might not know him because he's not a runner, and I think at least 90% of people listening are runners. But Joe Skipper is one of the best Ironman triathletes in the world. He's an owner of Valer, which is the mobile app that I'm using for strength training now with that promo code. I didn't actually have this written down, but that promo code that I shared last week, Sweat Elite 10, to try that out for 10% off, I think. And I think Google, it's Android, it's a month free. But yeah, I've sort of become, friends with Joe, and we speak on messages and the phone and voice notes from time to time. And he mentioned that the best way to, and almost everyone listening would know this because, I feel somewhat stupid saying that, my last several marathons, or at least most of them, not including Chicago though, I haven't had the drink tables. So I've had to figure out the gels and the drinks on my own. And in Chicago, I knew where all the drink stations were and where all the gel stations were. And Morton, I knew, had several gel stations, which I knew were there, so I knew where to get the gels. But Houston, I believe, has the same amount of drink stations and gels, so I might be fine. But he's recommended that I get 2 of these flasks, the 150ml flasks, which I've bought, and just fill it up with the gels. So squeeze all the gels into there and run with them, basically, one in my hand and one in my pocket. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to carry 200 grams of carbs on me, 2 flasks of 100 grams each. So I've packed in a bunch of gels and a little bit of water just to make it a little bit easier to drink. It's something that people often don't think about. They often think they can only consume a gel in the packet that the gel's in, but you can actually empty the gels. And I know a lot of triathletes do this, especially on rides. They empty like 5 to 10 gels into a bottle and mix it with whatever they need, whether it's electrolytes or water. And so I'm kind of doing that, but in small flasks. So I'm going to carry 2 flasks with me. The only downside to that is it actually kind of starts to weigh you down a bit because 2 flasks of 150 mils is 300 grams of weight. It's almost half a kilo, which must be about almost a pound. Well, not really almost half a kilo. It's 300 grams. So it's 60% of half a kilo or 30% of a kilo. So which is like maybe half a pound. And so that starts to slow you a bit. And that's the only downside to doing this. But I'm sounding like an absolute clown because almost everyone listening to this has to carry their gels. So I should just shut up and just do it. But that's what I'm going to be doing, carrying the 2 flasks. And I'll probably pick because I'm going to be trying to run 216, 100 grams of carbs an hour. That means 100 grams for 2 hours, 100 grams for an hour, 200 grams for 2 hours plus 16. So that's about another 26 grams. So I need 226 grams of carbs. I'm going to have 200 on me, and I'll try and take another 26 to 40, maybe go slightly over 100 grams of carbs an hour from the gels and the drinks on the course. So yeah, simple. And for those, yeah, I mean, that's a good tip for people that Joe gave. And so I've heard of that before, but I sort of mind blanked it when I posted a story about my fueling for Houston. And it's that if you have a hard time opening gels and you're carrying like 5 on you, you should empty all of those gels into like one little mini flask, which you can easily just squish into your mouth. Because these flasks that I bought have those, it's probably a name for it, but they have those lids or those sort of heads where you can, it only comes out of the head if you squeeze the thing. If you don't squeeze, the actual ultra runners will probably just be looking at me going, dude, this is like the most basic shit that ultra runners have done for decades. But if you don't squeeze the flask, nothing comes out. So it will never fall out unless you squeeze the top of the lid. So yeah, great idea. Thanks, Joe, for the tip. And I will be doing that at Houston. But yeah, you can track me over there at the Houston Marathon app. I have no idea what number I am, but you'll probably be able to find me through the name. And I will be trying to go out right around 68 low, 68, 67.45 to sort of 68.15. Dylan, who I'm going to be running with for the first part, he reached out to me last week and said he wouldn't mind. He heard what I said on the podcast and said I'd rather 68.30. He actually said he might want to go slightly slower. So we'll talk about that on the day before. But somewhere between sort of 67.45 and 68.30, I think would be perfect. If I had to pick an exact split would be perfect, it'd probably be like 68.20. Because that would be 2:16.40 pace, which is ideal, I think, for me, based on all training metrics. So we shall see how we go. All right, diving into a few questions before we get to the workouts of the week. Already burned through 27 minutes. I try to keep these to an hour or less, even though I usually go just over the hour. All right, this is the extension to the events selling out fast situation, which a lot of people have found interesting to talk about because it's such a problem, because the running boom right now is ridiculous. The amount of people entering major marathons and even big marathons such as Gold Coast, Osaka, CIM, Grandma's. I mean, Grandma's Marathon. Most people around the world would never have heard of that. That's in June. I'm doing that in the elite field. That's a pretty good race for elite runners in the US. It's good prize money. They pay down to 10th. I think first is like 15 grand or maybe 10 grand. What was I saying? Grandma's, I always lose my train of thought when I go on little tangents, but Grandma's sold out like immediately when it opened up in, I think it was November or December. Gold Coast, same thing. It's in July, sold out in November. So, it's becoming much harder for non-elite athletes and non-sub-elite athletes that can get into these fields late to get entries. So Sebastian says, email, hi Matt, just listen to the IMO 20 where you discuss a potential entry point system for major marathons. Don't know if you've heard of this, but in ultra trail running, there is already a thing. To even sign up for many major ultras, you need a specified amount of ITRA points, which you can only get from running other ultra races. Yeah. See, I'd heard of this, but he's explaining it in detail, of which I didn't know the specifics. Each race is awarded 0 to 6 points from the International Trail Running Association, ITRA. And then race organisers for big ultras set a minimum points that runners should have achieved over their course of, for example, 12 months to be able to enter their race. Not suggesting that major marathons could introduce an entry limit, but you can easily think of a separate category of entry to, for example, Chicago for people who have run at least 3 to 5 10Ks, half marathons, etc., whatever over the course of 12 months or similar. No question from me related to this, but just thought I'd send over in case you were interested in looking it up. There's a ton of info on ITRA point system online. Yeah, I love this. So this is not a question, it's just an extension. I love it. So it seems to me the problem here is, or at least the parallel you're trying to draw is that in the trail space, all the races seem to have kind of been able to be governed almost by one ITRA, Trail Running Association. And that's probably as a result of trail running in general being quite a new thing. And so they've realized, they've probably looked at some other sports and been like, we need an overarching body. Now, World Athletics is sort of the overarching body for road races, but I feel like not really. Like World Athletics probably would have no idea about 70% of the events that go on around the world. When you speak about marathons, they probably know about most of them. But I think it'd be much harder here. I mean, World Athletics would have to do this in a way. So they'd have to really be able to take a grasp on all events, even 5Ks and 10Ks and halves. And that would be hard to do because making an event what's the word? Abbott's, not Abbott's. What's that? I'm mind blanking. There's an organization that measures events. Sorry, total mind blank. Many people would know. AIMS, AIMS. They're linked with World Athletics. So AIMS measure road races to ensure they're measured 100% accurately with a wheel. Actually, a couple of my friends do that as a side job. They measure for AIMS. So you can become certified to measure and measure courses. And AIMS would have to measure thousands of races to make sure, because, in trail, it's pretty easy. It almost sounds like it's just a completion. And in this case, I guess you could argue that just completing is enough, and maybe it doesn't really matter if the race is slightly not measured accurately. I don't know. My brain's just going in different directions with this, but I like it. Yeah, it's obviously being done in the trail space, so it can be done in running. And there's so many emails in my email box about this problem. It's interesting. Like Jeff, in fact, this email from Jeff came on January the 6th. Jeff's the guy that actually recommended the Ryan Hall podcast I talked about last week that I know many of you listened to and really liked. He said, "Hi Matt, Happy New Year. What are your thoughts about the following? In order to address the issue of the growth in major marathons and the challenge for runners to gain entry, what about not allowing runners to participate in consecutive years? I think this would help for events such as Boston and New York and allow more runners to experience these majors. The events could waive this for elite runners, perhaps sub 220 for men and sub 230 for women, to help them promote their event. Thanks." Yeah, see, that's a good idea, not a bad idea too. You can't do an event 2 years in a row. But I'm leaning more towards that whole point system. And if once you do a certain amount of races, you can then race the better ones. I wouldn't be surprised if this starts at some point soon. It's a big job though. It's a huge job because in trail, there's nowhere near as many road races. I have no idea what the ratio is of trail races to road races, but I would guess it's maybe 30 to 1, as in 30 road races to 1 trail, but that would be a complete guess. And so that would mean that you'd need a huge organization with a lot of people to pull this off. But it seems like it's ripe for it. Where the incentive would come from to run something like that, I don't know. It would probably be something that World Athletics would have to literally create a new team for and get AIMS to be involved. Interesting stuff. Okay, 32 minutes. I'll answer one more question before diving into the workouts of the week. Okay, Michael, email. "Hi Matt, first time writing in, been following the channel and your marathon efforts for many years now. I had the opportunity to bump into you at the finish area after CIM, and I just wanted to again express my gratitude for your generosity with your time." Sorry, I hadn't read this in full. I was totally, in fact, I remember you, Michael. You came up to me. We were about 50 meters past the line to the left, if you're looking at the finish line, because I was going down to try and see Reem finish. You were with 2 friends. Unless I've mixed you up with someone else. I don't remember anyone else coming up to me at the end, but that was definitely something I remember. I was totally zooted after my marathon, as I was walking towards gear check, I saw your tall frame to my right and knew immediately that it was you, and I just needed to say hello somehow. The only processing my brain could do at the time was to tap your shoulder while you, Reem, and your 2 friends were in the middle of a conversation. Oh, okay. So this is after Reem finished. Oh, okay. I do remember. I'm sorry. I've actually completely mucked it up. Okay, this was late down the road. Forget what I just said a minute ago about where I thought that was. I do remember you. You were after when Reem had finished. Yep. We were near the food trucks. Once again, I apologize for doing that, but you all were especially gracious and didn't seem bothered at all. I have one race-related question for you, something that affected me during this CIM more than it has ever previously. I'm generally a pretty anxious person, and I typically have difficulty sleeping before races. With CIM, I'm not going to suggest what you'll think I'm going to suggest for that one. With CIM in particular, there are a lot of race morning logistics, e.g. method of transportation to the shuttles, can I catch an Uber to downtown SAC at 4 in the morning, how early I need to wake up accordingly, etc. The evening before the race, I only got 1 hour of sleep thinking about all of those things. I took a Morton CAF 100 before the race, and in the first 2 hours, I was mentally exhausted and nearly DNF'd because I kept wanting to step off to the side and close my eyes. Oh man, I'm really sorry. That's a bummer. I'm sure that part of this is because I don't race very frequently. So each race seems like a huge moment. So a question for you, someone who races frequently, have you ever worked through those jitters yourself? Okay, sorry, I didn't actually really read this really at all clearly. And I probably would have not read that first paragraph just because that's kind of personal. But here we are. Try not to edit these at all. So I do not get super nervous before races. And I think it's because I used to in the 800 days badly, really nervous, sometimes to the point of which I felt like I wanted to vomit. And I think because I raced, 60 or 70 800s between the age of 17 and 26, maybe, probably 6 to 10 a year. So 800 is so cutthroat. If you make one mistake in the 800, you're kind of done. As in, if you plan to win that race and you've got competitors close to you and you make one tactical error, or you have a bad start, or you just get boxed in, you won't win. Or at least you've made your chances extremely low. And so because the 800, my times were right around 148 to 150, around 148 many times. And so that just tells you 1 minute and 48 seconds of a 2-lap race. It's pretty hectic. And I think because I got so used to that, and then I went to the marathon where it's 2 hours and 20 minutes or around there, there's just so much more room for error. And it's I almost start to get nervous at the 15-mile mark of a race or a 25K. That's when I'm most nervous because I'm about to go through a lot of pain. And I'm not nervous about anything else other than the fact that I'm about to go through a lot of pain. So I don't really get nervous before races that much, not really at all. But I know a lot of people that do, and you're not alone. Reem gets pretty nervous. I know some friends that get very nervous. Look, I don't really know what to suggest here because suggesting substances is probably inappropriate, but they can help. But I just think doing everything that you possibly can my answer is so lame. Sorry, notification. The answer is just so basic. It's try and find things that can relax you. Maybe book a hotel or an apartment with a bathtub. That's really relaxing for me. And try to get your mind off it as much as possible. And try and think about all the things that make you really nervous before races. So in CIM's case, it was getting to the start area. And try and think about I know this can be expensive and maybe not easy to do, especially if you book your accom late, but try and book something a walk distance away so that variable is out of the question. Look, I think at the end of the day, you just have to realize that you've trained as hard as you possibly can for this race. You've done everything that you can. And to some extent, fate is just going to... I'm not a religious person really, and I'm not overly spiritual, whatever, but I can tell you that, fate will work itself out. You'll get what you deserve eventually from the work you put in. And I've had many marathons in a row that I've missed my goal by a long shot. But then if you just keep sticking at it, it will work out. And so I think you just have to start to think to yourself, whatever happens, it'll happen. If I miss a gel, I miss a gel. If I just make sure you don't muck up the big things, getting to the start line in time, making sure you go to the toilet, all these sorts of things. And I think racing more and more frequently probably will... I try and get the athletes that I coach to race, especially 5 and 10Ks, basically as much as they can, because they're fantastic training sessions and it gets you used to those nerves, dealing with them, processing them. So I would try and race way more frequently, 5 and 10Ks, to deal with the toilet, to deal with all these small things. And look, at the end of the day, I think you have to also think to yourself that if you have a race that doesn't work out, I was about to say who cares? Obviously you care, and probably some people close to you care, but it's not the end of the world. You are going to move on and you are going to race again. Well, I suggest you race again. But I just think sometimes we place way too much pressure and emphasis on one race. So I would get used to racing way more if I were you. I would do 5Ks and 10Ks as much as you possibly can until that feels super comfortable and easy and you feel confident, and then go back to the marathon. Okay, cool. Workouts of the week. Got some good ones today. And by the way, thank you so much for the kind words, Michael, at the start. I remember exactly who you are now. There was a few people that sort of came up and said hi after the race. And when I said one, I thought you were talking about specifically right at the finish line. And that was 3 others. But you're talking about when we went past the finish line to the food trucks. Cool. Okay. Workouts of the week. 5K, 10K. I like this one. This is one that I prescribe to people I coach sometimes. I'm not going to, because I'm already at 38 minutes or 39 minutes, I'm not going to repeat the workout. So if you want to skip back to hear what I say again, feel free, but they are also written in the description of this YouTube video or of the podcast player if you want to actually take a screenshot and use these workouts. Sponsored by the Sweat Elite Coaching Academy. Not really, no money is exchanging, but I am a coach. I run a coaching company that's growing a lot. And if you sort of like the way that we talk about training and coaching, do consider joining us. That link is also in the description, or you can just message me on Instagram or on Strava and I can take you to the right place to sign up. But these workouts are great for people that coach themselves and or even people that have a coach. They can just suggest them to their coach. 5K, 10K, 2K at half marathon effort. By the way, there's 90 seconds recovery between everything here in this 5K, 10K workout. 90 seconds, 1.5 minutes. 50-minute warm-up jog, 50-minute cool-down jog. 2K at half marathon effort, 1,600 at 10K effort, 1,200 at 5K effort, So if you think about it, I'm going 2K 5 laps, 1600 4 laps, 1200 3 laps, 5K effort, 800 2 laps at 3K effort, and then 4 400s at mile effort. Good workout. 5K, threshold right down to high-end VO2 max. Half marathon workout, 15-minute easy warm-up, and then we have 6 to 7, you can choose how many, by a mile with 2 minutes rest. And each mile is split in half. The first half is at pure true threshold. You're going half marathon effort, and the second half is slightly faster. So you're basically sitting right on threshold. You're getting to the point where your lactates are stabling out towards the end of that 800. For most people, that'd be about 3 to 4 minutes, 230 to 4 minutes. And then you have to do the second half of that mile a little bit faster. How much faster is up to you, but around 10K effort. And the reason, if I said 2 minutes rest before, it's 3 minutes rest. And the reason why it's 3 minutes rest, I've just noticed here I said 3, and I'm pretty sure I said 2 before. The reason why it's 3 is because in the second half of these miles, your lactate production will rise a little bit above threshold. It should. So you're going to need a little bit more rest than normal. If it was just 6 or 7 by a mile, just at threshold with no sort of lift, I think the ideal recovery would be more like 90 seconds. Marathon, 22 miles. This is in miles, this one. I bagged out miles last week during this section of the podcast. I do a lot of running in miles. Now I live in the US, and they're not so bad. So this long run's actually in miles. So if you're in kilometers, bad luck this week, although you can convert these if you like. This is a workout that I've seen someone do, but I have no idea where. It's just in the back of my mind that I've seen it because I sometimes do some progression runs similar to this, but I don't do it exactly like this. Okay, 1 mile easy warm up just to get the legs sort of warmed up a little bit. And then we're going to do 6 miles at marathon goal pace plus 40 seconds a mile. 5 miles at marathon goal pace plus 30 seconds a mile. 4 miles at marathon pace plus 20 seconds a mile. 3 miles at marathon pace plus 10 seconds a mile. 2 miles at marathon pace, 1 mile at marathon pace minus 10 seconds a mile. So faster than marathon pace. So that would mean, for me, my goal marathon pace is, let's say 5:15. That's actually, I think, a 2:17 marathon. Just for ease of, I'm not going to say 5:12, let's say 5:15. That would mean that plus 40 seconds is 6:05, right? Have I got the math right there? No, it's 5:55. 5:55, because 30 seconds would be 5:45. 5:55. So 1 mile easy, 6 miles at 5:55 a mile. Then I go 5 miles at 5:45 a mile, 4 miles at 5:35 a mile, 3 miles at 5:25 a mile, 2 miles at 5:15, and then 1 mile at 5:05. Beautiful progression run of 21 miles. Very hard. This is a hard workout, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. I'm not super sure if I'd advise this to people that are relatively new. I probably say that quite a bit in this section, but this is one for pretty experienced runners. But I'll probably do something like that at some point. I quite like it. And then you can actually jog or walk a little bit to finish off, and that would make it start. What I just said there, including the 1 mile warm-up, is 22 miles, which is 35.5K. So yeah, if you want to convert that to kilometers, although I could probably make a really similar one for kilometers. In fact, I will do that next week. I'll basically make a very similar thing to this in kilometers, because I think long grinding progression runs like this are really good for you, where you slowly get a little bit harder, but you're constantly working pretty hard. I think mentally they are really good for preparing for the marathon. Okay, more questions. See how many I get through before we run out of time. David, email. Hey Matt, I know I already asked this on Strava, but just getting it here to make it easier on you, since you said you prefer questions through email for your workflow. What kind of carb cycling are you currently doing, and what kind of carb cycling have you done in the past? I'm very interested in using carb cycling to reach my goal, cutting enough weight to maximize racing potential, marathon currently, but not too much weight to where I am undernourished or to the point that my performance starts suffering. Really enjoying the pod and love following your progress to greatness. Davis Clark. Thanks for all you do, David. Okay, so I think I've explained this a few times, and I'm more than happy to explain it as many times as people like, because I'm really interested in this topic. But I think I'll say how I see this before I explain what I'm doing. I've noticed that on almost any, Okay, so I'll start by talking about the zones. I don't really use zones that much, although I do kind of like the idea of it. So let's use the 6-zone model or the 5-zone model, where zone 1 is really easy jogging, zone 2 is sort of normal aerobic running, zone 3 is getting pretty close to sort of marathon effort, like steady state, zone 4 is threshold or half marathon, 10K, and zone 5 is above that, like quite hard VO2 max. Let's just use that for simplicity. If I'm in zone 1 and 2, I can basically run all day with no carbs. If you start doing that out of the blue, so if you one day come off carbs and you stick to fat and protein and you do these runs, you'll feel kind of weird on your first few runs. But then your body quickly realizes what's going on and it adapts quickly. This has happened to me many times. And I can run for 3 hours or 2 hours in zone 2, having very few carbs in the 24, 48 hours before, or even none, because my body can use fat at that intensity very easily. Is it burning fat and that's causing weight loss? Not really. That's not really how it works. But hear me out. Once we get to zone 3, and especially zone 4 or the upper end of zone 3, our body needs to use it. It doesn't really work very well with fat anymore. It just can't really work efficiently with fat. If you try and work having very little carbs and you out of the blue, you will notice that you almost very, very quickly run out of gas. There's people like Zach Bitter and some other ultra runners that have just like trained over years to be really good at that, but the majority of us just won't be able to do that. And so we need carbs. And so I explained that for a reason, that if you want to lose weight but not cripple your training, think about your carb intake around what I just said. So if you've got 3 days in a row of only easy running, right, and your goal is also to shed weight, like it often is for mine, not all the time, but it is for David, then in those 3 days of easy running in a row, you should basically have no carbs and keep in a calorie deficit. And why the no carbs? Because carbohydrates are obviously critical for performance, and I am a massive carb fan. But if you have 1,000 calories of rice, right, or you have 1,000 calories of chicken, the rice is going to make me nowhere near as full as the chicken. And so and same goes with high fiber food, vegetables, other meats and stuff like that. And so if you try and eat 3,000 calories, so most of us males, at least around 6 foot and 70 kilos more or less that I am, would probably be burning in a given day when you're easy running somewhere between 2,800 and 3,200 calories in the day. So to lose weight, you have to be under that, and ideally by some degree, so 2,200 to 2,500. If you try and eat 2,500 grams worth of carbs, it's super easy and you're probably still hungry, right? And so then you feel like eating more. If you try and eat 2,500 grams worth of protein and fat and fiber, you feel quite full. So it's very easy to do this without being hungry if you avoid carbs on those easy days, right? Then when you get really close to a hard workout, I always say sort of 3 meals before. And what I mean by that is if I train on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., the 3 meals would be breakfast Wednesday, dinner Tuesday, lunch Tuesday. That sort of, I tend to use 18 hours before the workout. So if the workout's at 9 a.m., sort of from lunch onwards the previous day. If you load on carbs then, you fill up your glycogen stores sort of in a short period of time, and then you train. And in that window, I'm not trying to lose weight. You need to go away from the losing weight part there, because your priority is to nail the workout, not to lose weight. So it's almost like for 2 brief periods of every week of 24 hours, which is the 24 hours around the hard days, which is Wednesday morning and Sunday morning, my goal is to have as many carbs as possible and to nail the workout. The other 5 periods of 24 hours, everything outside of those periods, my goal is to be in a calorie deficit. So it's really that simple. And so that's what I've always done. I've never really done anything different, although mind you, I am doing something slightly different right now, and I'm doing the whole 4 days of carb depletion before 2 days of load. I'm very aware lots of science and studies have come out to say that doesn't really work very well as people originally thought, but I quite like it for a reason that most people don't understand. And it's that if I'm going to load heavily on, and this is a really nuanced sort of minor reason that one could argue it doesn't really matter that much, and I would agree with that, but I'm loading so hard on the 2 days before races, having 700 to 1,000 grams of carbs, I'm going to be in such a calorie surplus in the 2 days before the race that I'll actually gain about, not half a kilo, but probably a quarter of a kilo or half a pound. Now, I can lose that weight in the 4 days before that load, so I essentially don't gain anything. So on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before a race, assuming race is on Sunday, marathon that is, I'm basically trying to lose half a pound or a quarter of a kilo. And that's the phase I'm in right now, by going very low carb, very low cal. So I'll shed that weight a little bit and then I'll gain it back in the carb load so I don't start the race heavy. Now, we're talking about half a percent, 1/4% of body weight here. So maybe it's much of a muchness. But personally, I feel like that's a good move. And I've done this carb depletion twice now, and I just feel really good when I load back on the carbs. So science says it doesn't really work. Probably true. It is true. Science is something we have to pay attention to. But I like the effect of it, and I also know that our metabolism is sort of improved, or doesn't go backwards if we do things like this. We restrict carbs heavily for one period of time, then we flood it with carbs. That's why cheat days are a good idea, or it's one reason why cheat days are a good idea. So your metabolism is actually in a better place if you are always switching up what you're doing like this. So you're doing a mass carb load, then you stop, then you go big time other way, low calorie, low carb. And so it sort of works for a few reasons. So even if it's not working for the reason that most people think I'm doing it for, which is the whole carb restriction, carb load, it's sort of working on the front of weight loss for me as well. Hope that helps, David. But if you have anything more specific to ask about that, please do let me know. And when people ask what carbs I'm using, that's up to you to work out. I personally respond very well to white rice for some reason. Not so much to bread, even though I do have bread sometimes. White rice seems to just be the meal that really, really keeps a good, I've worn the glucose monitors, like it keeps my energy and my glucose very stable for a long period of time for some reason, every single time I have white rice. So it's up to you to find the right carbs. But there's carbs in so many things. I mean, one athlete that I coach, I think he's listening, I won't say his name, but he was telling me that he's waiting for a carb drink to come in the mail for his training, and he's been waiting for a while. And I'm like, that's great, and that's because it's marketed as a carb drink, but lemonade is also a carb drink, and so is Coke, and so is Sprite, and so is orange juice, and so Cam Levins shared on the podcast with me last year or the year before, he drinks lemonade when he runs 205 marathon. So any drink will do with carbs. You don't have to buy the fancy one with the label that has carbs written in bold with fire coming out the back of the logo and all these naked women flexing. Like, you don't need all that. You just need something that says on a label, carbohydrates, 50 grams or more. Okay, Ben Jansen. Ben's coming on the Arizona trip. Looking forward to meeting you, Ben. Hey, man, absolutely love the IMO series, this email you're doing. It's right up there in my top 3 pods. I get excited for when they come out. What are the other 2? I'm going to guess Joe Rogan. No. Inside Running, and he's Canadian. I don't know if there's any Canadian podcasts about running. Is there? I've never heard of any. I'm going to guess he's talking about Sidious and maybe Inside Running. My question surrounds a peptide called BPC157, body protective compound. I've been listening to podcasts like Rogan, Huberman, and Tia talk about this forever, and recently I've had friends use this for injuries with amazing success. Have you ever heard about it? And if so, what's your opinion? I just started using it a few days ago, oral form, for a lingering groin strain, so hoping to have good news by the time I see you in Arizona. Oh, sorry to hear you going through that groin pain. Hopefully you'll be all good. But I have not even heard of this, and I'm a bit surprised I haven't, because I listen to a lot of Rogan. Huberman I haven't been listening to as much lately. I don't really have a reason why. And Atia I don't listen to too consistently, even though I have listened to quite a lot of his podcasts, probably back several years ago. Sorry, just having a drink of water. So I'm surprised I haven't heard Rogan talk about this. But no, I've never heard of it. But I'm going to look into this now. I'm assuming it's legal. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be emailing me knowing that I'm going to talk about it on the podcast and I said your full name. So assuming it's fine. Interesting for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting substances. I'm going to be really quick with this because I don't want to be one of those people that just continuously pushes marijuana. But I'm in some discussions with people to say that there is so many interesting things coming out of the marijuana space with strands, with focus, with concentration, and I think in 10 years, marijuana and the different strands that come from it and from all of the different derivatives that can come on it will be curing all sorts of problems. But it was just banned for so long that no one could do studies on it. But back to the thing here, and I'd like to replay this podcast in 10 years when that happens. I'd be investing big time in that opinion, just because I'm hearing different things in the US. But anyways, because marijuana is not just one thing. There's all these different derivatives and there's hundreds of different things, and they're all slightly different to each other. It's fascinating. But yeah, no, I don't know about this, but I'm going to look into it. So thank you so much for telling me. Really running out of time here. So, hey, Matt, Paul, Strava. Hey, Matt, enjoying the series, IMO series. You've mentioned on another podcast your goal for a half would be sub 65 minutes. I'd love to hear what you think your goals would be for every distance from 100 meters to marathon, and even your thoughts on running 100 plus to 100 mile ultras. Also, you've hinted at racing an Ironman before. What do you think your goal will be for that? This is a cool question. Okay, so, how do I say this without people going, oh, you can't run that? This is just, if I lined up for every single race, this is just what I would hope to run. I don't know if I would run it. I think in the 100 meters, my goal would be to run under 12.2 seconds for 100 meters. I think in year 12, I ran electronically 11:59, I believe, in a sprint, and I was, competing in the sprints at a reasonable level at that point, as in representing the Southport School. Actually, in year 12, I didn't do the 100. I think I did the 4 and the 8. But there was people in my year at school that were running 11.0, and I think I was about sixth. I don't even know if I was I wasn't the 4 by 100 relay. I think I was 11.5, but I'll talk about right now 12.2. 200, I'd try and break 24.5. 400, I would try and break 52 flat, I think, which is cool to think because I reckon last year I would have been aiming for more like 56. But I think the speed work I've done has majorly improved that regard. I think I'd try and run 51 point something. 800, and I've run 48.7 when I was much younger as a time trial, not electronically. It was a time trial about a week out from a major 800 race. 800 right now, personal best is 148. I think I'd probably try and run, if I could run 51, that's 144. I think 156 is what I'd try and run for 800. 1500, 355, 354. I think in that mile race in May that I didn't race very well, I think I split 401. So maybe 353, 354, I think I'd try and run. 3K, I won't mention, it's not a real event. 5K, probably under 14:10, maybe sub 14, probably not though. I'd say probably 14:0 something. But it's hard to say. 10K, probably 29:20 to 29:30, I'd say. That'd be my goal. Before I ran 2:20 in 2021, I did a 10K time trial. It's on Strava. Maybe 10 days before in Denver at altitude, so 5,300 feet or about the same as Falls Creek, 1,600. And I ran, it wasn't a race, and it was 10K on the GPS, so not really. But I ran 30:45 at altitude, which I think equated to a 29:50, but that's not counted because it's not a race and it was on the GPS. So I think now that I'm definitely in fast and 220 shape, I'd probably go for 20. I'd be stoked with sub 30. I've never run under 30. I've raced very few 10K races, especially in the last few years. But I'd be stoked to break 30, but I think sub 29:30 would be probably about right. Half marathon, sub 65. Marathon, we know. Ultra, look, I don't know if times are relevant in ultra, but I don't have any confidence in being able to do an ultra because I can't really finish marathons without cramping. So I don't have any confidence in finishing an ultra at this stage. And same with Ironman. My goal, I've broken it down and I think I could do 55 minutes for the swim, 2:35 for the run, and 5 for the bike, 5 hours, which is an 8:30. But cramping would cripple me, I reckon, in the run. I reckon 5 hours on the bike, I reckon I get off the run and I just cramp the whole way and probably do like 3.5 hours, just because my cramping is so bad. But if I could figure out how to literally remove all cramps, which is just the most stupid thing to say because that's part of the game, I'd try and go sub 8:30 because having so much swimming from high school, I think 6 months of training, I could probably go 55, 56. I think 2:35 marathon is definitely realistic, maybe sub 2:30, but maybe not. And 5 hours for the bike. I haven't done that much cycling, but I feel like I could probably get to that point, although please tell me if you think I'm an idiot, if you're an Ironman triathlete or a cyclist, you think I'm totally off. Maybe that's overestimated, the cycling part. I think the running and the swimming are right because I've done a lot of both. Obviously, the running, I think I know exactly what I'd do. Swimming, I'd say just because I've done so much swimming in high school. Bike, I'm just not really sure of. I've just put 5 hours, but I might not be able to do that. So yeah, I'd say, I think I've said before that sub 9 would be a good goal, but it's so hard to tell because of the cramping for me. So yeah. All right, 59 minutes. I said I was going to mention a bad story about some brands, and I've run out of time, so I'm going to have to do that next week. So I will note that for next week. There's also a couple more good questions that I didn't get to, just about long runs. I think I mentioned in the intro that I was going to talk about that, so I haven't gotten to that, unfortunately, but I will. So Troy, your question about long runs is coming next week, and Sarah, both from Australia, your question about some bad stories about brands will be also coming next week. So sorry I didn't get to them this week. I know I mentioned the intro. But yes, thank you for listening in. Managed to get through this one without any edits, which is the goal. And check out Globe Runners in Boulder coming in April. I really like to see some of you guys there. It'd be awesome. The link's in the description, or you can head to thegloberunners.com. And I'll speak to you all next week after the Houston Marathon, where I'll do a little bit of a recap as to how it went down. Hopefully I have a faster PB than right now, but we shall see. But I'll speak to you all next week.